I would like to know if there are any questions on this Saturday morning. We talked about quite a bit last few times we have been together. And a lot of it was centered around Jesus' experience in the garden, as well as the what we call the Last Supper, the communion, and how much we have misunderstood it. So I want to know if there are questions about it. And I think the questions are extremely important because of how long we have embraced an understanding that was not quite the true understanding. Yet I don't condemn it because it is the thing that kept the scriptures in the earth, even though they were being taught for selfish reasons and greed. It was a manner that I do believe the Creator used in order to keep the scriptures from being destroyed during that period of time when they were being manipulated. So, are there any questions about what we have spoken about, or if there are questions in reference to anything that you have experienced during the course of this week, either by in a physical way or through thought or reading?
This is for Mel. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I had it during meditation. I don't quite understand what balance is, and I don't quite understand what harmony is. Can you delve into that a little bit?
Beg your pardon?
Can you explain that a little bit?
Oh.
What balance and harmony is?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks.
When we speak about balance and harmony, we are not talking about everyone thinking the same. We're not even talking about everyone acting the same way. What we are actually talking about is humanity coming to a place where it becomes human, and people are treated equally, and equality does not mean the same. Where people are treated with dignity, and where race and misogyny are things of the past, where religion has no foothold to be able to manipulate mankind. The balance would free us from war, and would free us from greed, would free us from seeing other people as the other or less than. That's how I see harmony and balance, because both of those to me are the same. If there are others who could add to this or even make it clearer, I do appreciate it. Would you do that, please? Ramel, does that help you?
Greatly, it does. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Anyone else or any more questions?
I would comment. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I kind of see balance as not in terms of things outside of myself, because things outside of myself can be too precarious, too skewed in one way or the other. So I kind of see balance as what I need to do to center myself so that I can look at those things from a less subjective point of view. Because if I don't, and my example is the last few days have been I'm just overwhelmed by political ads and like here in North Carolina, there's a Black woman running for Senate against a white man who is a Trump supporter, and just all the stuff that they try to throw at you. And the last few days has been making me really nervous and stressed. And I just said, okay, I can't watch any of that anymore. And then I just had to get in tune with myself, because balance for me is not refusing to allow that stuff to throw me off. I mean, first I have to realize it, of course, but just refusing to allow all that stuff to throw me out of the center of myself, if you understand what I mean. Out of realizing who I am, and that that stuff will be whatever it's gonna be. But knowing in the end that I still have influence if I just let myself be who I am and not let it take me off center. Does that make sense?
It
Yes,
does.
it does. Thank you.
Morning.
Hi, this
Pastor.
is.
Good morning. Go ahead, Brian.
No, sir. No, sir. You go ahead. I'm sorry.
Again, I just want to say, with Vermel bringing up the word balance and harmony, I too have been giving some thought to that word balance. And I think that, as we continue to go through this journey, the spiritual journey that we're on, how we balance, our home life, how we balance, our work life, how we balance, living in communities, and more importantly, balancing our self-consciousness, is just interesting, that we can appreciate how it connects to our beginning. And I think that spiritually, and looking at it, from science, and looking at it from, our spiritual walk, it's that so above, so below. And so I really, truly appreciate being able to look at it, from both of those perspectives, in terms of just trying to maintain a sense of unity, harmony, and balance. And sometimes, we can be more in one domain where it can overwhelm us, but to be able to appreciate that word balance is something that, I truly, again, continue to learn from and grow from, where I don't become overwhelmed. So, I appreciate just hearing those two words this morning. So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Ron?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Rainia. I wanted to say I was listening to this. We've been listening to this book called "Do I Stay Christian?" at West Coast, and good morning. We were talking about the yes part of that. The no part, I was all on board with. But when they described the yes part of it, Pastor, or the author, it was a lot like you talked about, finding our common humanity, and also not letting the message that Jesus stood for, not the faith that he's become, the message, letting that be, not letting it be co-opted, by far right and extremists, and just that human kindness. And it's interesting to look toward that goal, because I don't always see it now. There's a lot of fear, and I look at Christianity and kind of how people are using it and have for all its existence, and I go, how can this be balanced? And yet there was a message there that was powerful enough for powerful people to co-opt for their uses and to control. So there's good there too. There's that humanness there that it's really trying to show us. So I just wanted to share. It was interesting to read that and then have you say that this morning.
Thank you.
All right,
Randall?
this is, yes, sir. One of the images that came up to me when I was first listening to Pastor speak, and now after hearing everybody else, have you ever been driving a car and you're on a straightaway, and as far as you can see, it's a straightaway, and the road looks smooth, so you would think that you really don't have a lot of steering to do. You don't have a lot of you can't you know deep inside of you can't turn the wheel loose. The tires are going straight, the car is going at an even keel, and everything is fine. But there are things that going to influence where that car goes. It may be the wind, it may be a pebble in the road, it may be your steering is off, it may be your tires are not aligned, it may be a number of things that help that forces you or make you not only maintain your concentration, but to do whatever is necessary to keep the car centered. So we're like that. There are things that come in our lives that kind of take us off center, and you as you know as been said, it's an intuitive thing, and you go inside of yourself and you just kind of do a realignment, and it's so subtle sometimes you don't even recognize it, but we use those terms all the time, and we kind of take for granted we all understand them, and even when the question was asked, to me it was kind of hard to define it, but I you just agree with everything everybody said. It's not a still thing that stays constant. It's something that always needs to be adjusted, and depending on your situation or your mood, or as I just said, those ads are pretty challenging sometimes. But just the little things that keep your hands on the steering wheel, and make sure that the car doesn't veer one way or the other, because that's just who we are. And I think as we grow into other places of awareness in this journey, that balance becomes even more important. And so that's just my 2 cents on it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Anyone else?
To somewhat piggyback off what Mr. George out of Philly stated about balance and harmony, and this is something that I learned from Dr. Evans in musical appreciation. When you look at groups like the OJs, the Temptations, if you remove Otis out of the Temptations, and his role in the group was he was either tenor 1 or tenor 2. Because of the tenor, this is why you hear the other participants that sing. And that was also stated in the musical appreciation book. Yet one thing that they said that stood out to me, he called the tenor the antagonist, where you hear everyone's participation, whether it's the baritone, whether it's the alto, whether it's the soprano. So in this whole aspect of bringing balance and harmony to a situation, sometimes you may need an antagonist or some degree of sarcasm. So just from a musical appreciation, if you take Otis out that group, you don't hear Eddie Ruffin. If you take Eddie Levert and his brother out the OJs, you don't hear that guy that's getting them soprano notes and them high notes. So, and what really brings balance to the earth? Is everyone on the same page bringing balance, or do you need resistance to bring balance? Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Anyone else before I speak? Anyone else? Everything you have said has spoken, everything you've said has shown are in the best place that we've ever been in. The reason I say that is there is never change without an antagonist. I want to ask a question before I continue. In regards to what I just said, change does not come without an antagonist. Who is the antagonist on this journey that we're on? That's not rhetorical. Who's the antagonist on this journey that we're on?
I am.
I am.
I am.
Okay. You're right. You are. And the reason you are we are, I should say, is because if we were not in search of truth, all of the things that causes us to refrain from watching the news or watching those ads would not be taking place. We are in the perfect place in terms of the journey because the agony, the pain, the things that causes us not to want to hear those ads, or the things that Audrey was referencing, when my words not hers, when she felt inundated in a way that made her nervous. All of these things speaks to the quality of change. Keep in mind that change does not look like what we are seeing now. Change is what we are seeing now. It doesn't just look like it, it is. Don't be nervous, don't be afraid, but turn the TV off if it bothers you. However, I'm saying that we have the greatest opportunity to bring about the balance of which we speak. And we are at the very threshold of that balance right now. The troubling things about it are the things that gives us most insight. Example, we are at a place where feminine energy is being realized more than ever before. Is being embraced and attacked at the same time. When we look at it from that perspective, what we are seeing is something that's real, and that is duality, the attack and the embracing of feminine energy. The attacks comes in order to keep the status quo, which means that keep our eyes open and our eye closed. The continued embracing of it is the part that opens our eye. the struggles that we are having and the problems that we are experiencing. The problem that we were experiencing. Those are the things that tell us that we are in the right place. We are returning to beginning in many, many ways, not just the inception of what is. We are also turning to the beginning period when feminine energy was on the stage with masculine energy, and there was no conflict between the two. That cannot happen without there being conflict, because when the feminine energy was pushed off of the stage and banned from entering the building again, that's when everything began to fall apart seemingly. However, rather than those things falling apart, what was happening is the puzzle pieces for the human to become every bit of what Elohim is, or every bit of what it was created to be. The human would have to take these shattered pieces and put them back together again. The human would have to open the door and escort the feminine energy to the stage, embrace it, and seek forgiveness for what has happened with how masculine energy has treated it. That's where we are right now. We have two stages that we are faced with, and later on I'll go in depth with it, not later on today, but later on at some point. There's two stages that we should be focused on. Is feminine energy in both stages. One is the energy of the Caucasian woman, who we call Karen, the ones who are always calling the police on black males in particular, and the African woman, the woman who has, the African woman is the most educated group of people on the face of the earth. They are the fastest growing entrepreneurial group in the earth. They are the ones who are exerting the power and offering the message of reconciliation for everyone without seeking revenge on anyone. The Caucasian woman is reliving what happened to Emmett Till. The Karens who called the police on African males is no different than the Karen. No different than the woman who lied and participated with her lie in the murder of Emmett Till. There's no difference between that woman and the Karens today, because the whole purpose for her crying or calling the police is for some African male to be killed. It's just that simple. The crocodile tears, the words that they utter that are lies about how everybody's treating them, those things are necessary in order for that energy to be repurposed. That's what we're seeing. And the repurposing of that energy comes through a mirror. And the mirror of how that feminine energy should move forward, you can see that in the emerging feminine energy of the African woman. This has nothing to do with um, individuals. This has everything to do with a manifestation of what is taking place in the spiritual world. We are seeing the battle to keep things as they are. And when we look at the male Caucasian and the African male, what do we see? We see the Caucasian male has made every effort to keep the African male off the stage. Yet he's not been able to do that because he cannot function without that African masculine energy. And the reason I say he can't is because everything that has been brought into this earth for his convenience came through the African male, the African woman, primarily the African male. So what's happening now is the return, when the return of the African feminine energy in particular to the stage, the feminine Caucasian energy changes because it is overshadowed, overpowered by the righteousness of that African feminine energy. The unrighteousness is being corrected, and we're seeing that the unrighteous Caucasian energy, feminine energy is being corrected because the police are not buying the cries. They're not lynching African males simply because some white woman called them and said that they feel like they are threatened. That's a part of this change that we are engaged in. So when we look at what's transpiring, we have these ads, or whether it is the news, embrace it, because behind the curtain of what you see is a new day. Behind the curtain of what you see is a fresh beginning. It is a period of harmony between the masculine and feminine energies in the earth, without regard to whether it is African or European. Both have been interwoven, and the pieces of the puzzle that were shattered during the period when the feminine energy was being overwhelmed, dominated, being mistreated, etc., will be brought back together. And at that point, we will be exactly as Elohim is. And that is, as above, so is below. It means just as Elohim functions above, so does Elohim function below. That's the goal, because when the functionality of Elohim in this human body and the functionality of Elohim, the spiritual creator, are one, then harmony exists. Any questions or comments? Or may I ask, does that make sense to you guys?
Part of what you said, did I understand you to say those energies are interwoven?
At some point,
Did you? Huh?
at the point of harmony. At the point of
Could you
harmony.
go over that part one more time? Can you say that one more time for me so I can make sure I got that?
Okay, let me see it. Let me go deeper in depth in that, because I was talking about the energy of the Caucasian and the African being interwoven and righteousness coming as a result. Okay. See, this is what happened. Masculine and feminine energy has always been one in the realm of the spirit, okay? They are inseparable. Just as you cannot remove the estrogen from your body as a male body and expect to function in the way that your body is supposed to, the same comes with trying to extricate the feminine energy from masculine energy. It was not extricated, it was dominated. And what I'm saying is this. In our minds, there is a duality. There is separation between the feminine and the masculine. When we are at this place where we embrace feminine energy for what it really is, then the eye opens. When the eye opens, the eye does not see, does not experience, does not embrace what the eyes see. The eyes see a female body, a male body, and that's a separation they see. However, when you understand who you are spiritually, you see that the feminine and the masculine are interwoven. And the reason they are interwoven is because there cannot be balance unless they are. Think about this. When Elohim, Yahweh said, it is not good for this entity to be alone. They separated the woman from actually made Adam aware, the Adam aware of his masculinity and femininity. However, when that happened, in the mind of that entity of Adam came separation. And that separation was manifested in the 3rd chapter of Genesis when they were clothed in skin. And that separation was a physical separation. And the reason it's separated that way is because there is work to be done. The creativity of masculine energy and the wisdom of feminine energy must work hand in hand. They must become one entity in order for anything to be brought into the earth. Why do I say that? Because Elohim was both masculine and feminine. Creativity and wisdom equals production. Right now, with our eyes, we see separateness. And the reason we see is because rather than become intertwined or stay where we were with that masculine and feminine energy being one, the separation took place in the mind of the entity called Adam. And it manifested in the separation of physical beings. And now we are moving back to where we came from. And that is in a physical way, what we are embracing is the reality that regardless of what the body type looks like, feminine and masculine energy are still one. And the friction and the battles that we are engaged in is a battle to convince ourselves that it's not. The status quo has very little to do with how a man treats another man. The status quo has everything to do with keeping a woman, quote unquote, in her place and making sure that masculinity rules everything. And when that happens, the most devious, the most brutal, the most evil are the ones who are dominant in masculine energy. Does that make sense? Ron?
It does. I guess I misunderstood because I thought you said that the African and the European energy were intertwined. I never thought about that part of it, that portion of it. The feminine, masculine energy. I could see that. I see that makes perfectly good sense. But the other part put me on a different thought when I
Okay.
thought you was talking about the energy of the African and the European coming together, being
Now,
intertwined.
the en-
That's what I thought I heard.
well, when the European and masculine energies are intertwined, that can only happen when they become one. As long as there is resistance to righteousness, that will not happen. The resistance to righteousness is broke down by wisdom. We must also embrace the energy, the feminine energy. Even African males don't embrace that. We have to embrace that. Why? Because the wisdom is the source through which we are shown how to create unicity in the earth, meaning how to cleanse the earth from the vile thoughts of separateness, the vile thoughts of misogyny, the vile thoughts of greed and racism. When that happens, that is when those two are intertwined because they become one again. Why? Because they no longer see themselves with their eyes, they see themselves through the eye. Does that make sense, Ron?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Pastor, this is Evelyn. Good morning. So I do believe I'm on YouTube a lot, and I hear and see a lot of young African American men waking up. And is it because they're waking up about the feminine energy and how they need to respect it? Is it because we're bringing this to the front, or we're dealing with it?
Yes. See, Ellen, how is it that we can say that our desire for truth has set us on this course, and traveling this course in search of truth, we have uncovered everything that needs to be changed. If our journey has done that, then how can we not say that our journey also in revealing how things should be has influenced the psyche of the African male, so that the African male will begin to respect feminine energy. You can't have one without the other one. Does that make sense to you, ma'am?
It does, because now I hear and see a lot of things we don't get to hear about the African youth because they don't expose that. They only expose the negative part. But I hear more guys talking about, for instance, like one of my nephews, he told us, he said, "Aunties, thank y'all for having y'all natural hair." He said, "Not one of you guys in here have a perm in your hair." Not saying that that's wrong, but embracing our hair. And I hear it a lot on YouTube. It's just that it doesn't get put out there in the spotlight. But I was just thinking about that. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am. That idea of the hair is a reflection from what it was when I was growing up. And it's symbolic of accepting yourself for who you are. And I believe that the idea that you just expressed from your nephew is more prevalent than we think. I also believe that we should not be too concerned with the powers that be not wanting to teach a true history of what is and not desiring to teach anything and not denigrating CRT and don't know what it is, trying to say that you can teach true history without teaching African history. Making everything that's related to the African negative. I do not believe that we need to waste time being concerned about that. And the reason I call it a waste of time is because it is a distraction. If we get into the argument about what should be taught in school in terms of our history, then we lose sight of the bigger picture. Do we want to change what they teach in school about our history, or do we want to change the course of mankind? Which one is greater and which one is more effective? That's one of the questions I do believe we need to answer. And if that answer is changing the course of humanity, then that the history thing in schools becomes a shift of our focus from what needs to be to what actually is, because that becomes a battle about race, and racism is not our problem. We did not create it, and we cannot stop racism. However, we can change the psyche of humanity, and that's our goal, to change the psyche of humanity so that we can begin to treat each other like humans, because we are human.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. And I don't mean to change the subject, but I think it's related. When you were talking about masculine and feminine energy and how masculine energy just wants to dominate, it just occurred to me, and this question just occurred to me, is that why we're seeing so much of, seems to me like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but is that why we're seeing so much homosexuality in terms of in transgender and queer and non-binary? It seems like every generation another new thing cleaves off from what was there before. But my question is it because we're not getting back to the balance, or we're getting closer to balance, that we're starting to see all these things kind of cleave off? And I know it's a reflection of that dominant masculine energy trying to just mash everything down and it be dominant. So things are sort of seeping out around the edges. But is that why we're seeing all of that? Because we're getting closer to balance? Are we getting closer to bringing things back together? Or is it because we're getting further away?
No, the former, we're getting closer. Have you whack-a-mole? Every time you hit one, yeah, okay. This is it. When you play whack-a-mole, that mole will come up one way or the other, right? In all those places that you're unaware of. Feminine energy is going to be seen, is going to represent, is going to be present, regardless of how or what form it must be in order to be present. Whether it be homosexuality, it doesn't matter. I do believe what's happening more than anything else is that these gender roles that we have created are the source of the origin of all of the binary, all of these things are a result of our having this idea that you are a man or you are a woman, as opposed to understand that we both. And the feminine energy that's presenting itself in so many different ways
Okay,
is
I
actually
get that's feminine energy. I can see that clearly.
so. And that's what I'm saying when I say, Audrey, we are closer. And this is the thing about it. Feminine energy is actually saying to masculinity, the male domination in your face.
And we will not be denied. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's what I see. Because
Okay.
these bodily forms are less than of importance than we think they are. But yet at the same time, they're extremely important. And they're less important because we put too much emphasis on it more so than our spiritual essence. They're more important because they are showing us what the spiritual essence actually is, and it's undeniable that is both male and female. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I get that. I see now. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you.
This is Jenny speaking. Good morning. This has been clear in indigenous cultures for a long time, that lack of a clear-cut binary, and I guess different sexual orientations. I think it's unusual for our culture now, but historically, I don't think this is really all that new.
We are dealing with gender chaos. The gender chaos has been created by Christianity, Islam, and all the other isms. We have set walls between male and female, literally, because there are synagogues you go in where there is still separation between male and female. So we literally put walls between males and females. When in the beginning, there was the fluidity between the two. And I am saying that we're beginning to see that fluidity again. And one of the things that I really, really embrace, I really like about it is that the confusion of pronouns. If we are Elohim, there are no pronouns to fit us. We are nothingness, yet everything. We are masculine and feminine. And that supersedes he or she. Masculine and feminine. What is that? What do you call that? We don't need to call it anything other than masculine and feminine. The problem is that because we operate in a Greco-Roman system of thought, we have to have these labels that are set in concrete and without any fluidity at all. And the reason, Janice, it has not been a problem in the past and in some countries is because of the fluidity of it. In the countries where we find the problem with genders are the countries that have been influenced by Catholicism. And there are those who will argue that Catholicism did not have any influence on Islam. You need to study your history. You will see that Fatima was an effort to bring Islam under the umbrella of Catholicism. So the whole idea of this division, this separation, comes in terms of religion, has its genesis in Christianity. And Christianity, as it stands, has its genesis in our Greco-Roman history. Does that make sense?
It does, and it has to be about control. That's the only thing that makes sense.
Always about control.
Yeah, I think it is about control, Janice. And I think that's why we're seeing it seeing the gender fluidity here. I know it's been accepted in other cultures, but here, I think it's because the masculine energy wants to be so dominant here that now we're seeing it here. Because feminine, as Pastor was saying, feminine energy is going to reveal itself in some way. It will not be depressed or denied.
Absolutely. Look at Jesus. Here Jesus is in the streets of Palestine. And here are those priests and their associates, the scribes and Pharisees. Here they are dealing with the Levitican law, telling women that they must cover their head in public and their hair must not be to anyone except in the family. And the same thing is happening in Islam. Then here we are with Jesus at this well with a woman he has no contact with other than that moment. Of course, there's a spiritual message there, but the point of the matter is this. Rather than search for the spiritual message, we look at the woman and what appears to be a life she should not be living and disregarding the reality that Jesus is a total disregard for Levitican law when he speaks to a woman at a well who he does not know. She is not related to him biologically as is required. And he's speaking with her and telling her about herself. And then we find him again with a woman touching him. And he has no clue as to who she is. All he recognizes is that he's been touched. And then the woman who was about to be stoned, Levitican law says that she should have been. And the reason women should have been stoned then, not so much of what they did as it is what men said they did. And here Jesus is protecting a woman from being stoned. She's not stoned. So what was Jesus saying in this message? The Levitican law is no different than the Baptist doctrine or Methodist doctrine. It has no place in spirituality at all. It is a method of control. The control of women has been a desire of men for eons. And now we are beginning to see that Queen Zinga is on the rise, does not need a man to tell her what needs to be done, has the power, forethought, and the wisdom to get it done. Warrior women are on the rise. This does not place women above men. It does not place men above women. When I say on the rise, it means that she will not be denied. This feminine energy will not be denied. And there are those who are manifested masculine energy who seeks to keep them away from the role that they must play in order for us to have balance. And that is the role of wisdom and birthing. And birthing is not just having a physical baby. I'm talking about birthing the concepts of wisdom we seek to understand. And this must be if we are going to experience balance. Jesus has shown us so many things that we have overlooked because we have taken the Greco-Roman approach to the scriptures or to Eastern scriptures or to Eastern holy books. There are things I've read in books that deal with spirituality, but and when they deal with spirituality, they are always putting that male energy out front, like Buddha. is always out front. If you study the history of Buddha, Buddha was not considered a deity. His sacredness was tied to his mother's womb, and the sacredness of Buddha emanates from the womb that brought him into earth. And that was recognized until that Greco-Roman thought invaded India in those areas where Buddhism is prominent. And they cast aside the womb that was being revered that brought Buddha into this earth. So again, Jesus has shown us in so many ways how ignorant it is to make an attempt to reduce femininity to being a servant to other servants, but never being in a place of dignity, a place of wisdom, a place where it can freely burn. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah. And it's interesting too that a couple of things that I noticed in that movie, The Woman King, the fact that their gods were twins, a male and a female, and then the way they ruled, they were not in balance until they had the male king and the female king. So it was that European energy that came in, that's to say the man should be dominant, I guess, that threw them out of balance. Anyway, so that was just interesting to understand.
You're right. The Eastern words for king and queen are words. That separation did not come until males began to sit on the throne and to dominate. And honestly, the throne of England actually, as it exists today, came from the womb of an African woman. King, what was his name? He was the third, whatever his name was, married this African woman in Germany. So, and let me say this, please. There are those who may be listening who see this as a discussion of history and gender roles. That could not be further from the truth. It really isn't. This is a discussion of spirituality, not a discussion of religion. Religion tells us if we don't take a text, we are not talking about spiritual things. However, I say if we do take a text and limit ourselves to it, we'll never see spiritual things, let alone understand them. Because taking a text is centered around what you see with your eyes. And that is the reason, if you really listen at someone, quote unquote, preaching or teaching from a text, what you only get are the words on the page that you could have read for yourself. You get a word salad mixed with what's happening politically and what's written on that page with no understanding of either one of them. So when we are talking about the masculine and feminine energy, it's not about gender roles. Gender is a made up thing. When we are talking about the Greco-Roman influences, and we're talking about Jesus, we are not taking a text, neither are we just talking about something that's written in a book called the Bible. We're talking about the entirety of humanity, and we are talking about to not only embrace, but also to understand in greater detail what spirituality looks like and how we can share that with humanity so we can become humans. Okay? Any questions about that? Or can you?
Reb, I got a question for you whenever you get a chance.
Go right ahead.
Did you say go ahead, Reverend Richard?
Yes, sir.
Okay then. And Reb and Mr. George out of Philly, I don't really know how to ask this question. I'm gonna do the best I can do. One of the things that I established with European males very quick, and it's not just with European males, it's just kind of like with everyone. I don't mind spilling blood with you. And when I look at my daddy,
Oh, George, explain that, please. Spilling blood.
what's that?
You say you don't mind spilling blood with you. What does that mean?
Reb, I can barely hear you, boss.
When you said you don't mind spilling blood with them, what does that mean?
Well, I'm saying that, Reb, because if that's all a European male gonna respect, and that's all he respect. If you want the European male to respect you, gotta let him know you willing to spill blood with him. I mean, and this comes from a historical aspect. If the United States has been in existence for 250 years and about 27, 28 years, we've not been at war, and that's not consecutively, that's like 16 months here, 2 years here. The European male, when North Korea said they had weapons of mass destruction, the United States ain't said nothing. So I know it's not healthy to take that approach, but that's just one of the things that I want him to know I will spill blood with you
May I speak to
for
that?
what I believe in. What's that,
Yeah.
Rev?
May I speak to that?
Yeah, and I want to hear what you got to say, Rev, and I want to hear what, and when I say, you know, like I say, Rev, when I look at you, Mr. George, my daddy, Roy daddy, Joe daddy, Freight Train, y'all will, and it's not just male, it's that whole element of the African American that y'all didn't mind spilling blood for my advancement. So is that an unhealthy way to look at something, Reverend Richard, and B, or is it a healthy way? Because times that I have gone to war with the European, one of the perks that come from it is cowardly black folks ain't gonna mess with me. So is it healthy to be, and I would like to hear Mr. George's response in this because y'all older and wiser. So is it healthy for me to look at life like this, or is it unhealthy for me to look at life like this?
I'm going to ask those who you have chosen to speak first, because I will speak to you about my experiences in regards to what you're asking and what conclusions I've come to since then. And so here we go.
Yeah, George, again, you know, I appreciate, you know, your interest in terms of just being able to digest, you know, what we've been speaking about. And I like to just, you know, share with you personally that having a grasp or understanding of how the dominant worldviews have shifted, you know, over the period since the Big Bang Theory, or from the beginning of what I know, you know, during that time of the fourth spiritual paradigm, which Pastor talked about, the Greco and Roman Catholicism, you know, so much has been emphasized in terms of God the Father. And that has puzzled me, you know, within the last, you know, 10 years, 11 years, in terms of the manipulation and control, you know, of, you know, the Roman, you know, the government, in terms of just those who want to dominate, you know, from a humanistic standpoint. But I think, you know, again, for me personally, as we appreciate this spiritual journey that we on, you know, I like to look at this paradigm shift now that we can go back and look at the beginning when we talk about what existed before the beginning began. And so there was, you know, the third paradigm shift that talked about God and goddesses. And I'm doing it chronologically in a way because I just want to be able to see how we can get back to that oneness that, like you say, we can go to, we can shed blood, or we can, you know, however you know, interpret that. But I think that if we're dealing with it in terms of seeking truth, and again, sharing the love of who we are, and at the same time being able to come into the light of us being able to now do that which we're called to do, to bring balance and harmony. You know, I just want to, you know, again say that, you know, this is just an exciting time that we're living in. And I think that we all are trying to appreciate the masculine energy when I say it in terms of as a man. But I think that so much has been revealed to us, I say to those men who are on the call, that we are really diving into our female femininity, or our femininity as a man. And I think this is what's bringing enlightenment now to the young men, or to anyone that we come in contact with, because I think they now see it from our spiritual consciousness. So I don't know if that helped you at all, but I think that, again, you know, it's just a truly exciting time to be living in, where we can change the course of people's mindset in terms of seeing it from, you know, that authoritarian, or that from that worldview. But at the same time, you know, we know that spirituality existed before religion, and I think that we are coming into an awareness. So George, I know I might have, you know, said a lot of little different things in between, but I know that there's a reason why we're on the call today. There's a reason that we're connecting, you know, from all kinds of intelligence. And I just thank you, you know, just for asking the question and how you view, you know, those things from your spiritual journey. Because music, there's a message in the music, George, and voices are very powerful. And I think that, again, we want to be able to seek the truth, to share the love, and be the light. I'm done, Pastor. I just want to share those thoughts.
Okay, George, when you were talking about paradigms, you're talking about different periods of time, right? Or where there was dominance in terms of people seeking spirituality or the understanding. Am I right?
Yes, Pastor. And if I may, because again, I
Okay.
apologize for clarity with that. But for an example, you know, when we talk about God is everything and everything is God, you know, we speak about the beginning before beginning. And basically, you know, that is where all is one. You know, we all are one, yet many. We've talked about that, and from my conception, and to be able to appreciate that has moved me through, you know, the four dominant worldviews. When we talk about the second paradigm, Pastor, which talks about the Great Mother. You know, we spoke a lot about the importance of, again, without the womb, nothing can be birthed. And so there was that, you know, dominant worldview that the Great Mother, you know, Mother Earth, you know, the mother, you know, being, you know, right there at the beginning of time. And this was around, you know, the 25,000 before the Common Era and the 5,000 time period. And so I was trying to look at it in terms of what is written down, you know, that is factual, where we can come to a conclusion using an accurate method, or just to be able to talk about it. And then in the third spiritual paradigm, Pastor, it talks about gods and goddesses. And so when we talk about the woman king, when we talk about the oneness in terms of both the masculine and feminine energy, you know, I think it takes us back to all is one. And then that time period, you know, was around the 5,000 before the Common Era and the 50-year period of the Common Era. And so now I think we're living in that fourth paradigm where we talk about God the Father. And so as you spoke about it earlier in terms of, again, the Catholicism, the question is, what's next? And I think that we're moving to an integrated Godhead where it has to be the balance of the masculine and feminine energy. And we both have each of the energies. A male has a female, and the female has a male energy. And we're now coming into that oneness of trying to go back to the beginning. And that's how I'm seeing it pass. So hopefully, again, you can give us some further insight on that. I'm done.
Thank you, sir. At some point, I'm going to ask that you delve into that a bit more. And the reason I say that, and I'm not, George Watson, I'm not forgotten your question. We'll delve into that some more because I believe that the era of God the Father is over with, period, it's done. And we can talk about where it emanated and the ending of it, okay? But I at some point would like you to delve into that. To get to George, question about blood, I will spill blood with you. I've been there, George. And that's the one thing that Caucasians want us to do, is to join in a battle of spilling blood. They spilled each other's blood during the Civil War. And they did it in the ways that you can think of. And nothing changed. During the days of my walk in Pan-Africanism, African nationalism, we were closely tied to the ANC in South Africa and other organizations like that around the world. And what we realize is, regardless of who you are, if you are talking about spilling blood with Caucasians, you are always on the defensive. You will not be on the offensive. And the reason being is because you don't have planes, you don't have tanks, you don't have missiles. You are not capable, or should not be capable, I should say, of pouring acid on someone or using a flamethrower on them and not caring about it. It is impossible for us to do anything other than be on the defense. And another reason for that is not only weaponry, but also there are those Africans who will be fighting you in order to preserve the union, or to preserve, quote unquote, democracy that doesn't exist. One of the largest slave owners in our state was African. So when we look at it from that perspective, it is historical perspective. What we see is it also is religious perspective, earthly consciousness. And it never, ever results in anything other than more bloodshed and more hatred. I know this, so I can speak to this so clearly and adamantly because I was a part of it. I had no compunction about doing some of the things that you're talking about. I was always ready to do it, which means that I was always ready to be on the defensive, not the aggressor. Carrying weapons, having access to weapons far greater than anything you can imagine, changed absolutely nothing. it simply created more problems. What I have learned from my experiences in the Pan-Africanist/African nationalist movement, what I have learned from that, as well as the marches with King, what I've learned is that none of that works. And the reason it doesn't is because the African does not have in its psyche the ability on a broad level to do the things that it would take in order to subdue an enemy such as the Caucasian warrior. The only thing that makes a difference that I have found, having had all of those experiences and seeing the same results, is spirituality. What I have learned from that is Jesus walked with 12 men, and according to what we've seen so far, 2 women, maybe 3 in his band of travel. And he changed the world, but he did not do it with a sword as Peter wanted him. He did it with the sword of his tongue, of his mouth. He did it with the words that flowed from his soul. And as a result of that, he has influenced everything in this earth from the day that he started speaking until the day that he was crucified and resurrected. It's still there. So what am I saying to you? If the greater things are to be done, they cannot and will not be done with bloodshed from a weapon. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. The weapons of our warfare are spiritual. And we are engaged in spiritual warfare every single time we make a decision to not only learn about who we are internally, but to learn about our purpose for being in this earth. And understanding every bit of it is tied to our nature of being the most spiritual people on the face of the earth. No one could have contributed as much to the earth and suffered as much as we have suffered in the earth and survived, other than they were kept by the Creator. Yahweh has delivered us to a place where we have opportunity to free the whole world from the domination of evil, the domination of bloodshed, the domination of racism, all those things. And we do it simply by meeting 3 days a week and living it every day of our lives. And understanding that to take a life, and I mean that literally, because when you kill somebody, you are taking a life. And whether you intended to do it or not, if they bleed out, you kill them. If you are engaged in a battle and someone in your group kills somebody, you did it too. That is not an easy thing to deal with. If it were, that would not be the existence of PTSD. PTSD has everything to do with killing or attempts to kill you. All of these things are outside of the realm of who we were created to be, and that's why we suffer so much from them. The spiritual nature of us is being expressed when we meet. And since we have come together, not on our own, but because we have been thrust together by the hand of Yahweh for the deliverance of the whole world, we are changing things spiritually. And what we are able to see, reading the signs of the times, we are able to see at moments that what is to come, and we have not missed that. Why is this so? Because the Creator has brought us into this earth for the express purpose of changing everything. You would say, well, why would he allow that to be? Because we spiritual beings cannot become Elohim in full this until we create men in our own image. And I don't mean literally gender men, I'm talking about mankind in our image. If our image is total spirituality, then the image that we are created in is spirituality. So when those who are not spiritual begin to become reflective of spirituality, or to begin to manifest a righteous heart, a righteous presence in this earth, that will be in our image. And you cannot create people in your image if you're killing them. You can only create people in your image if you are informing them, if you are loving them, if you are understanding who they are and your purpose for being here. We, the nation that was born on the waters, are the ones who are to bring this about. The 1619 Project hit it on the head when it talked about the nation born on the waters. We were born on the waters from the womb of our Creator. The womb of our Creator, we were birthed in pain and agony, struggle, and racism. We were birthed in the hands of death and at the bludgeoning of those who enslaved us. And we survived. We survived in Pharaoh's house for the express purpose of bringing Pharaoh to a place of deliverance. There are those who will be lost along the way, but they will be redeemed on the other side. The redemption of the earth is in our hands. And if the African does not redeem the earth by virtue of understanding the spiritual nature of everything that is, then the earth will not be redeemed. And I do not believe for a moment that redemption is outside of our purview of understanding. I do not believe for a moment that we are so callous until we will go down this road of understanding only to end up in an academic battle about what it means with those who have no clue as to what spirituality is. We are not that callous. We are on this journey not for ourselves. We are on this journey for humanity. And humanity includes the attitudes of everyone who say they hate us, of everyone who get pleasure in us. So when we talk about I will shed blood with you, that's a war we will not win because we're fighting it on a carnal, on a material level, as opposed to understanding that the greatest power that's in this universe is the power of spirituality. And if you are the most spiritual group of people, and you are a subset of that people by virtue of being a nation different than any nation on this earth because you were born on the waters and you've gone through so much, then how much more power do we have if we have been brought through these agonies in order for us to bring to a place of redemption mankind, and in doing so, redeeming the earth itself as well. That's who we are. Audrey cringes when she hears sees on these ads and hears on TV. The reason she cringes is because it is painful to think for a second that these people have no care in their hearts for anyone except themselves, to the extent that they would take Social Security from people who already are making choices between medicine and food. That cringing comes from spiritual nature of her being. That's who we are. We are not in those predicaments where we are don't know where our next meal is coming from. No one on this phone is in that place. Why? Because if you have to focus on surviving in this physical world, it's difficult for you to avoid the distractions and focus on redeeming humanity in all the world. So that is my reasoning for not being aligned with, shedding the blood in that manner. That is the conclusion that I have come to after having organized in the Deep South and never woke up without having 2 weapons on my body when I stepped across my door sill. Never lying down to sleep when I could not put my hand on a weapon. Never. And teaching others to do the same. My experiences has brought me to a conclusion that spirituality is the only way. And I hope that helps you, not only you, George, but every one of us who's on this call. Ask any question, make any comment. I'm good with it. So if there are questions or comments, please raise them. Right now with that, I'm done. George, I hope it helps.
Quick question for whoever was speaking. You can go ahead.
Oh, thanks, George. I'm hoping that my question will be in line with what you're thinking. This is Chenise. I'm curious, like on a sort of smaller and more personal scale, when dealing with Caucasians who don't mean you well. And I'm thinking about George was saying, he's like, I don't mind letting you know, like we can dance, we can shed blood if you really want to. But how do you communicate that? How do you stand your ground? Because, oftentimes we're dealing with folks who want to intimidate us or who want to threaten us on our jobs. How do you maintain that attitude of like, I'm not scared of you and we can dance, but we don't have to physically go to war? Does my question make any sense? I feel like I'm stumbling around here.
You're not stumbling around, it does make sense. First of all, if you notice that we are never confronted one-on-one with Caucasians unless there are others around. If you're talking about on your job, there are ways to communicate. I'm not afraid of you. Neither am I afraid of this job without being violent or vile. If you are approached by a group of them, then there are ways to communicate that you're not afraid of them. And I believe now, if your door is kicked in, that's a whole different ballgame. I don't believe that's going to happen because I do believe that when you relegate yourself to being totally committed to bringing harmony to this earth, the universe is obligated to protect you. I believe that. I believe that so much until I had a mission to pick up one of my cousins who some Asians from another country were attempting to snatch. And I chose not to do it with a weapon because I said, I felt like I needed a weapon before I knew who I am in terms of trusting God. Back that time, that's what I was saying. And if I trust God, I don't need that weapon. And the person who went with me was shocked to know I did not have a weapon. And I said to them, I don't have a weapon. I have become a weapon because I trust God. And everything works out the way it's supposed to. Now, we have been conditioned to believe that we have to meet force with the same type of force until we have forgotten the type of force that Jesus met with force was spiritual force. And yes, he died. Yes, he was murdered because of racism. Emmett Till was too. But Jesus' martyrdom kept him alive. Emmett Till's martyrdom started a whole movement that guided us from civil rights to spiritual change. Where we are now, not start when we were in the church. It started with when we crossed the great waters. And the movement in the streets in terms of organizing started after the murder of Emmett Till. And keep in mind, the murder of Emmett Till came from the Caucasian's vision of femininity. And now we are in the throes of changing that. When tomorrow we talk to California, tomorrow at 3, I think it is, we talk to California. Most of the people there are female. Changing that paradigm of thought, of vision as to what Caucasian feminism is, shift the paradigm also of the mentality of those who are the Karens who will risk the killing of an African male to get their way. All of that shifts. So Denise, I hope I'm answering your question, that there are ways to do this, to communicate it without having to engage in efforts that are outside of the parameters of our ancestral culture, outside of the parameters of our spiritual essence. Does that help you?
Makes sense. Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're quite welcome, and thank you for the question. George Watson.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Reb. Reb, in asking that question, some of that question was based metaphorically speaking. Yet some of it was not. It was just as I stated. And it's just real intriguing to me that, when we talk about dominating the earth, I look at it, well, how you going to dominate it? Gun is not the answer. Well, a gun is the answer, but it's not the solution. I'm smart enough to know that. That's why I ain't even bought one. Yet, is when I say spill blood, believe in, stand 10 toes down on it, and you make it do what it do. If you lose a friend, they lost. Stand in your belief for humanity. A certain portion of that question was directed in that arena. Yet the other 40%, spilling of blood and just from a historical aspect, that's all they've been doing. And somewhat buy into it or that aspect. But yet it's just the part that I admire about the generations before me, your way of sacrificing. And my Shane wasn't talking about no feminine energy or masculine energy, yet she knew what she had to do to make the community better. And I did state, Reb, that I'm going to struggle in asking this question. So some of that question was not really based upon violence being responded to by violence, yet a portion of that, it did include that. It's just that if we're going to dominate the earth, what are the tools that we gonna use? And
Okay.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Okay. The tools that we're going to use is one tool, spirituality. I'm going to say this at the end because we're going to break in a few moments until tomorrow. People like me people who had the attitude that I had are the people who actually were the protection for people like Martin Luther King for as long as it lasted. Because they had a choice back then. They could deal with King and his nonviolence, or they could deal with us. And that gave made King's voice stronger. And at one point, he acknowledged that to Stokely Carmichael. So we did what we did. It made it enhanced his nonviolent stance. But now we are in a totally different space with that. And that is, we are on the journey of total spirituality, as opposed to going to the slave master, asking him to free us or to give us equality, when we know when we asked for it the last time, we ate on plantations called ghettos, and all the jobs were taken away. So our organizers were in the community turning us against each other. I'm done with that. Let me say this before anyone gets off the phone. We will not be at Great New Faith tomorrow. We will be on Zoom, on the phones. The reason we will not be at Great New Faith tomorrow is because it's going to rain, like 85% chance of rain. And I do not want to be in the building. I won't be in the building. As tight as things would be if we were in that building. Why? Because people are still dying. They're just not telling you. They're not putting it out there as they were at one time. So, and I mean dying from COVID. Of course, people are still dying from COVID and another virus that they don't understand yet. So I'm not going to jeopardize what we have protected for so long. And that is understanding that we don't have to be in a physical place in order to be who we are, in order to exchange our understandings of spirituality. So it is not the time, obviously, because if it were, the weather patterns would not have changed as rapidly as they did. I am more concerned about your health than I am about just us being there and running that risk. When you hear that people are advertising for jobs and can't find anyone to work, remember, over 1 million people died in this country because of ignorant people like McMaster opening up everything. Yes, you preserve the businesses, but you lost your employees. If 1 million plus people died, then the reason you don't have a viable workforce at this time is because you killed them all. They are in the grave. That's why you can't find people to work. And when you consider how the job market is being manipulated, and all of the onus is being put on lazy Black folk, as opposed to the white folk who killed through COVID the workforce. So I'm not going to take that risk with your life. I am the shepherd who will do whatever it takes to protect the sheep, even if the sheep really are pushing to be together. And the shepherd is doing that as well. But we want to do it under better circumstances. Thank you. Any questions about that?
Sage, just one. This is Vermel. Are we meeting at 10:30 or our normal 11?
11,
Okay. Thank you.
okay? Anyone else?
Pastor, this is Ron. I do have something I want to say if you guys have a minute. Because I won't be on tomorrow. I won't be able to be on tomorrow. George's question to me was interesting, and it made me think about something. I'm just a supposition I want to leave us with. Lately, I've been studying the life of Jacob and looking at what he went through before he wrestled with the angel, and that being a sort of a conclusion for what I want to say. His life did not begin with his birth. His life, if you will, begins with Abraham's father and that journey. So all of that is the journey of righteousness coming forward. And if you follow that and understand it, it parallels with who we are. So when he talks about the ladder and what takes place there, and at the very end, suppose that wrestling with the angel was where we are right now, meaning all the things that we stress over. The question that George asked what as a wrestling, the fear that Audrey brought up is a wrestling. The apprehension that I mentioned is a wrestling. So we move through all those things, and at the very conclusion of it all, it becomes one with the message. He overpowers the message, and in other words, he reaches the conclusion that this journey that I have taken to truth, I am going to fulfill it, and there is nothing here that's going to stand in my way. And he gives his all to that message. And suppose that is where we are. We have talked about everything. We've talked about the inhumane things we see in earth. We talked about the treatment of women. We talked about racism. We talked about everything. So maybe one of the last things that we deal with is our own wrestling and our own stumbling blocks and distractions, and before we become Israel, before we become the spirituality for the journey, for the journey that man must take. So I look at that and think about the question and all the answers and things that were said. All of that is a part of the history, all the battles, and this was something that maybe was meant particularly for us, and suppose this is the end of not the end of the stress and the wrestling, but the putting emphasis on it and allowing it to distract us, that we move now in a position of being Israel and being that foundation, being that doorway that we were intending to be all along. And now they become clearer to us, and we become like Jacob, where we become the conduit for different levels of consciousness, that we have nothing can be, no barriers can be stronger than we are to stand in the way of reaching those goals. So just a thought as I think about why the question came up and some of the answers that were given. So thank you. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, sir. It does make sense. And what that triggered with me was Jacob becoming Israel. What does that mean to us? Probably talk about that or touch on that unless something else comes up tomorrow. So thank you, guys. Unless there are other questions or comments, we will see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Are we good?
Good.
And those, go
Yes,
ahead.
sir. Thank you.
Okay. And those of you who are in contact with people from Greatly Faith, as some of us are, please let them know we will not be there tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. Have a great
Okay, thank you.
weekend.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Take care.
All right,
Everyone.
bye-bye.
Bye.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Okay.